The Last Echo Commander. Zara Chen floated in the cramped escape pod, watching the debris field that had once been Earth's greatest starship slowly drift past her viewport. The Defiance had been humanity's final hope, carrying the last survivors of a species the galaxy had written off as extinct 3 centuries ago. Now even that hope was scattered across the void in twisted metal and frozen corpses. The Kethvar hunting fleet had found them. Somehow, despite all their precautions, despite jumping through 17 different systems and using every stealth technology humanity had developed, the insectoid warriors had tracked them down. Zara had watched from the bridge as their bioships tore through the Defiance's shields like paper, their acid cannons melting through the hull while their boarding drones swarmed through the corridors. She had been in the command center when Captain Morrison gave the evacuation order. "Get to the pods!" he had shouted over the screaming alarms. "Someone has to survive! Someone has to remember!" Those were the last words she heard from another human being. The escape pod's computer chimed softly. "Warning! Life support at 60%. Recommend immediate course to nearest habitable system." The nearest system was Proxima Centauri, 47 light-years away. Even if the pod's damaged jump drive worked, she would arrive as little more than bones and dust. Zara stared at the star charts floating before her. Every system marked in red showed Kethvar territory. The blue markers indicated Veltar space, humanity's former allies who had abandoned them when the war turned ugly. Green showed neutral zones controlled by the Merchant Federation, traders who dealt with whoever had the most credits. There was nowhere left for humans to run. But as she studied the charts, something caught her attention. A small yellow marker in an unexplored region near the galactic rim. The database listed it simply as Kepler 442b, unknown civilization detected. Avoid contact pending diplomatic assessment. The entry was 300 years old, from before the first alien wars, back when humanity still believed in peaceful contact. Zara's fingers hovered over the navigation controls. The system was over 200 light-years away, far beyond the pod's normal range, but if she rerouted all remaining power to the jump drive, including life support reserves, she might just make it. Of course, she would probably die in the process. She thought about Captain Morrison's last words. Someone has to remember. Someone has to survive to tell the galaxy that humanity had existed, had fought, had refused to go quietly into the dark. Maybe death was a small price for that chance. Her fingers danced across the controls, plotting the longest jump any human had ever attempted. The pod's AI protested loudly. "Warning! Attempting this jump will result in total life support failure. Probability of survival, 0.03%. "Override safety protocols," Zara commanded. "Authorization Chen Alpha 77. Override accepted. Initiating emergency jump sequence." The pod shuddered as the jump drive spun up, drawing power from every system. The lights dimmed, then failed entirely. The air recyclers went silent. Through the viewport, space began to twist and bend as the pod prepared to tear a hole in reality itself. Zara closed her eyes and thought of Earth. Not the burned wasteland the Kethvar had left behind, but the green and blue world she remembered from her childhood. She thought of her parents, killed in the first invasion. She thought of her brother Marcus, lost when the colony ships were destroyed. She thought of the billions of humans who had lived and loved and dreamed, all reduced to scattered atoms by alien hatred. Space folded around the pod like origami made of starlight. For an infinite moment, Zara existed everywhere and nowhere at once. Then reality reasserted itself with a violence that shattered every bone in her body. When consciousness returned, she was floating in a medical pod filled with healing gel. Through the transparent walls, she could see a chamber unlike anything in human design. The walls seemed to be grown rather than built, organic curves that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. Strange symbols drifted through the air like living things, rearranging themselves in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "You are awake," said a voice that spoke directly into her mind. The words carried overtones of curiosity and something that might have been compassion. "We had not expected your survival. Your species' biology is remarkably resilient." Zara tried to speak, but found her throat raw and damaged. Instead, she formed the words in her mind, hoping whoever was speaking could understand. "Where am I? Who are you?" "You are in the heart of the Nexus, the last city of the architects. We are the ones your kind called the Ancient Ones in your mythologies, though we prefer a designation that translates roughly as the Gardeners. We have been watching the galaxy for millions of years, tending to the growth of younger civilizations." Images flooded Zara's mind. She saw vast cities that spanned entire continents, beings of pure energy shepherding the first stirrings of life on a billion worlds. She saw the architects' golden age, when they had guided dozens of species to enlightenment and technological transcendence, and she saw their slow withdrawal as the younger races grew proud and warlike, choosing destruction over wisdom. "The Kethvar," she managed to think. "They destroyed us. They destroyed everything." The presence in her mind grew colder. "Yes, we are aware of their expansion. The insectoids have consumed 17 civilizations in the past 1,000 years. Each time, we hoped the galaxy would find a way to stop them. Each time, we were disappointed." "Then why didn't you intervene?" Anger flared in Zara's thoughts. "You have all this power. You could have saved us." Could we? The question carried millennia of pain. Young species must find their own path to wisdom. When we intervened in the past, when we gave technology and guidance freely, it led only to dependency and eventual collapse. The races we uplifted became weak, unable to face challenges without our help. When we finally withdrew, they destroyed themselves within generations. Zara felt tears she couldn't shed. "So you just watched us die?" "No," the voice said softly. "We watched you fight. And in your struggle, we saw something we had not witnessed in 10 million years. Your species faced extinction with courage rather than despair. You refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. You chose to preserve hope in the face of absolute darkness." The healing pod began to drain, and Zara felt gravity return as she settled to the chamber floor. Her body was whole again, stronger than before. She could feel power flowing through her cells, as if the architect's technology had rebuilt her at a genetic level. "We have a proposition," the voice continued as Zara stood on unsteady legs. "The Kethvar must be stopped before they consume what remains of galactic civilization. The other races are too fractured, too afraid to stand against them. But perhaps a single individual, properly equipped and guided, could accomplish what armies have failed to do." A section of the chamber wall melted away, revealing a corridor that stretched into impossible distances. At its far end, Zara could see a chamber filled with devices that hummed with barely contained energy. "We offer you the tools of the architects, technologies beyond your current understanding, weapons that can shatter stars and shields that can turn aside the force of collapsing suns, the power to stand as an equal against any force in the galaxy." Zara took a step toward the corridor, then stopped. "And in exchange, become our agent. Strike at the Kethvar where they least expect it. Remind." The ghost returns. 6 months had passed since Zara entered the architect chamber, though time flowed strangely in the Nexus. When she emerged, she was no longer entirely human. Her body had been rebuilt with nanotechnology that made her faster, stronger, and more resilient than any baseline human had ever been. Her mind had been expanded to process information at superhuman speeds, and her nervous system had been enhanced to interface directly with architect technology. But the changes went deeper than mere physical enhancement. The architects had given her access to their vast database of galactic knowledge, filling her mind with the secrets of 1,000 civilizations. She knew the weaknesses of every major species, the hidden political currents that shaped interstellar society, and most importantly, the true nature of the HFY threat. The insectoids were not simply conquerors driven by hunger or territorial expansion. They were the surviving weapons of an ancient war, biological machines programmed to consume all non-HFY life in the galaxy. Their creators had died out eons ago, but their final command still echoed in the genetic code of every drone and warrior. They would never stop, never negotiate, never show mercy. They existed only to kill. Now Zara stood in the command center of her new ship, studying holographic displays that showed HFY fleet movements across 3 sectors. The vessel itself was a marvel of architect engineering. Smaller than a human frigate, but more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Its hull was made of programmable matter that could shift between configurations at will. Its weapons could punch holes through time itself, and its drives could fold space so efficiently that crossing the galaxy took mere hours. The ship had no name in any language Zara knew. The architects simply called it the instrument, a tool designed for a single purpose: to cut out the cancer that threatened to devour everything they had spent millions of years cultivating. "Target identified," announced the ship's AI, its voice a harmonious blend of tones that somehow conveyed vast intelligence. "HFY harvesting fleet detected in the Vega system. 16 bioships currently stripping the 4th planet of its remaining population. Estimated civilian casualties, 4 million Veltar refugees." Zara felt her enhanced heart rate increase. The Veltar were her people's former allies, the blue-skinned humanoids who had stood with humanity during the first alien conflicts. They had abandoned Earth when the war turned hopeless. But Zara couldn't bring herself to hate them for it. They had tried to save their own people, just as humanity had tried to save theirs. Analysis of HFY force composition: 4 Dreadnought-class bioships, 12 hunter-killers, approximately 60,000 ground forces engaged in systematic extermination operations. Fleet is operating under standard harvesting protocols, minimal defensive posture. Perfect. The HFY had grown arrogant in their dominance. They no longer expected serious resistance from their victims. Most species simply fled before their fleets or died quickly when resistance proved futile. They had forgotten that predators could become prey if they grew too comfortable. "Initiate approach vector, stealth configuration, maximum velocity." The instrument shifted around Zara like a living thing, its hull flowing into new shapes optimized for speed and invisibility. Through the viewports, space began to twist as the ship accelerated beyond the speed of light, following paths through higher dimensions that no other species had ever discovered. When they emerged at the edge of the Vega system, Zara's enhanced senses immediately processed the tactical situation. The HFY bioships hung in orbit around the dying world like bloated parasites, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that indicated feeding mode. On the planet's surface, she could see the glow of burning cities and the dark smears where hive drones were strip mining entire continents. "Show me the refugee camps," Zara commanded. The display zoomed in on the planet's northern continent, revealing a series of hastily constructed shelters in the mountains. Veltar families huddled in caves and abandoned mines, children crying as their parents tried to comfort them with lies about rescue that would never come. HFY hunting parties moved through the valleys below like wolves, methodically tracking down every life sign. Zara had seen this scene repeated on dozens of worlds over the past months. The HFY didn't simply kill quickly. They preferred to let their prey suffer, to taste the fear and desperation before the final harvest. It was a cruelty that went beyond mere survival instinct, a malice that seemed burned into their very DNA. "Begin the assault! Target the dreadnoughts first!" The instrument's weapon systems came online with a sound like singing crystal. Zara felt the ship's consciousness merge with her own as they became a single entity focused on destruction. Through the ship's sensors, she could perceive the enemy vessels not just as visual targets, but as complex biological systems with heartbeats, neural networks, and vulnerable pressure points. The first dreadnought died before it knew it was under attack. The instrument's primary weapon, a device the architects called a reality disruptor, simply erased a sphere of space-time where the bioship's central nervous cluster had been. The massive vessel convulsed once, then began to drift as its autonomous systems failed. The second dreadnought had time to scream before it died. The sound echoed across all radio frequencies, a psychic shriek of agony that made Zara's enhanced mind recoil. But she pressed on, targeting the creature's reproductive chambers with surgical precision. The bioship's hull split open like overripe fruit, spilling its offspring into the vacuum where they died gasping for their homeworld's toxic atmosphere. By the time the Kethvar fleet realized they were under attack, half their number were already dead or dying. The survivors turned to face this impossible threat, their chitin-armored commanders screaming orders in their clicking language. But they were fighting an enemy they didn't understand, using tactics developed for wars they couldn't comprehend. The hunter-killers tried to surround the instrument, firing streams of acid that could melt through any known armor. But Zara's ship simply phased out of normal space-time, reappearing behind the enemy formation to deliver killing blows with weapons that struck at the quantum level. One by one, the bioships fell silent, their bioluminescent patterns fading to black as their life functions ceased. When the last enemy vessel was destroyed, Zara turned her attention to the planet below. The Kethvar ground forces were already retreating to their landing sites, abandoning their harvest as they fled toward the sky. But Zara wasn't about to let them escape to report what they had seen. The instrument descended through the atmosphere like a falling star, its hull blazing with energies that turned night to day across half the continent. Kethvar warriors fired their weapons skyward in desperate defiance, but their bioprojectiles simply vaporized against the ship's defensive fields. Zara activated the instrument's ground assault systems. Pillars of coherent energy erupted from the ship's hull, each one precisely targeted to eliminate clusters of enemy forces without harming the surviving refugees. The Kethvar died in flashes of light that left only shadows burned into the ground where they had stood. Within minutes, it was over. The Kethvar were dead, their bioships reduced to drifting hulks, their ground forces nothing but memories etched in stone. In the mountain caves, Veltar families emerged cautiously into the sudden silence, unable to believe their salvation had come so swiftly and completely. Zara landed the instrument in the valley below the refugee camps and stepped out onto alien soil for the first time in months. The Veltar survivors approached her slowly, their large eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. They had never seen technology like hers, never witnessed power on such a scale wielded by a single individual. "Who are you?" asked one of the refugees, an elderly Veltar whose blue skin was marked with the ritual scars of a military veteran. "What species? We have never encountered your kind before." Zara removed her helmet, revealing features that were recognizably human, but enhanced beyond baseline parameters. Her eyes glowed with the soft light of integrated technology, and her skin had a subtle luminescence that spoke of deep cellular modifications. "I am human," she said simply, watching as recognition dawned on the alien faces around her. "Impossible," whispered the veteran. "Humanity is extinct. The Kethvar destroyed your homeworld 3 centuries ago. There are no survivors." "There is one," Zara replied, and I am here to remind the galaxy that humanity's story is not finished." The crowd murmured in amazement and growing excitement. News of B. The Empire breaks. The Kethvar Empress squatted in her spawning chamber at the heart of the galactic core, her bloated form pulsing with the rhythm of 1,000,000 eggs developing within her carapace. For 3,000 years, she had directed the expansion of her species across the galaxy, watching civilizations fall before her children like wheat before the scythe. No force in the known universe could threaten her here, surrounded by 10,000 bioships and 1,000,000,000 warrior drones. Until today. The first reports had reached her 6 months ago, describing impossible attacks by an unknown enemy. Entire fleets had vanished without sending distress signals. Harvesting operations had been interrupted by a single vessel that fought like a force of nature unleashed. Most disturbing of all, the attacker claimed to be human, a species the Kethvar had exterminated centuries ago. The Empress had dismissed these reports as the fevered fantasies of dying prey creatures, desperate to believe in salvation that would never come. But as the attacks continued, as more fleets fell silent and more worlds were freed from Kethvar control, she began to realize she faced something unprecedented in her species' history, an enemy that could actually threaten their dominance. "Bring me the prisoner!" she commanded in the subsonic clicking that served as the royal language. Her guards, each one a perfect killing machine bred for absolute loyalty, scurried to obey. They dragged in a Veltar commander captured during the raid on Vega Prime, the blue-skinned humanoid's body broken but his spirit still defiant. The Empress had kept him alive specifically for this moment, when she would finally learn the truth about her mysterious enemy. "Tell me about the human," she hissed, her mandibles clicking with barely contained rage. "Tell me how one of those soft, weak creatures survived our purge." The Veltar commander raised his head, meeting the Empress's multifaceted gaze without flinching. "She is not the same species you destroyed," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "She is something new, something your kind created through your own cruelty. Every human you killed, every world you burned, every child you devoured, she carries their memory. She is vengeance given form, and she will not stop until every last one of you is dead." The Empress reared back, her massive form towering over the prisoner. "Impossible. We are the apex predators of this galaxy. We have consumed civilizations that spanned thousands of worlds. What can one creature do against the might of the Kethvar Empire?" The commander smiled, an expression of pure satisfaction despite his pain. "You're about to find out." At that moment, alarms began screaming throughout the hive complex. The Empress's consciousness expanded through the bio-neural network that connected her to every ship and warrior in the system. Through 1,000 eyes, she saw the impossible. A single vessel emerging from hyperspace at the edge of her most heavily defended stronghold. The ship was unlike anything in the Kethvar databases, its hull shifting through configurations that hurt to perceive directly. It moved with purpose and deadly grace, ignoring the storm of bioplasma that erupted from the defensive stations as it accelerated toward the core worlds. "Scramble all fleets!" the Empress commanded, her psychic voice reaching every ship commander in the system. "Converge on the intruder! Bring me its pilot alive!" But even as her orders spread through the hive mind, the attacking vessel was already among her outer defenses. The Empress watched in growing horror as her most powerful bioships simply ceased to exist, erased from reality by weapons that struck at the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Entire battle groups that had conquered 100 worlds vanished in flashes of impossible light. Inside the instrument, Zara felt the weight of the moment settling around her like armor. This was the end of her long campaign, the final confrontation that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. She had spent months preparing for this assault, studying the Kethvar core worlds through long-range sensors and captured intelligence, mapping their defenses and identifying their weaknesses. The Empress was the key to everything. The Kethvar were not truly an empire in the conventional sense, but rather a vast biological collective controlled by a single overriding intelligence. Kill the Empress, and the entire species would collapse into mindless chaos. Their ships would drift powerless, their armies would stop functioning, and their 3,000-year reign of terror would end in a single stroke. "Approaching the primary hive structure," announced the instrument's AI. "Defensive response indicates maximum threat assessment. The enemy is committing all available resources to stopping us." Through her neural link with the ship, Zara could perceive the massive scale of the battle unfolding around them. Millions of Kethvar warriors swarmed through space like living asteroids, their bioweapons creating storms of acid and razor-edged projectiles. Bioships the size of small moons turned their full firepower on the instrument, unleashing energies that could sterilize entire continents. But the architect technology proved superior to everything the Kethvar could bring against it. The instrument's hull phased through enemy attacks that should have vaporized it instantly. Its weapons reached through dimensions the Kethvar couldn't perceive, striking at targets that thought themselves safely protected. One by one, the defenders fell, their deaths sending psychic screams through the hive mind that served only to increase the Empress's desperation. "She's trying to flee," Zara observed as her sensors detected massive energy buildups in the core structure. "The royal chambers are preparing for emergency translation." The Empress was attempting to use the same hyperspace technology that had allowed her fleets to spread across the galaxy, planning to escape to a backup hive in another system. It was a sound strategy that had preserved the Kethvar ruling caste through dozens of previous crises. But Zara had anticipated this move. The instrument's reality disruptors could do more than simply destroy matter. They could also interfere with the quantum fields that made faster-than-light travel possible. As the royal chambers began to phase shift, Zara fired a precisely calibrated burst that collapsed their hyperspace envelope before translation could complete. The Empress found herself trapped in normal space-time, unable to escape as her final line of defenders crumbled around her. For the first time in 3 millennia, she experienced something her species had inflicted on countless others, but never felt themselves: the cold touch of genuine fear. The instrument descended through the atmosphere of the hive world, its passage turning the toxic skies to plasma. Kethvar ground forces fired everything they had at the descending ship, but their weapons might as well have been thrown stones for all the effect they achieved. The vessel settled gently in the courtyard before the royal chambers, its hull still glowing with residual energy. Zara emerged wearing armor that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, each piece flowing seamlessly into the next. In her hands, she carried weapons that had been forged in the hearts of neutron stars, devices that could unmake the fundamental forces that held matter together. But more importantly, she carried something the Kethvar had tried to destroy but never could: the indomitable spirit of humanity. The royal guards came at her in waves, their chitin armor gleaming with bioluminescent threat displays. They were perfect killing machines, each one capable of destroying a squad of conventional soldiers. They moved with inhuman speed and struck with the force of pile drivers, their claws and mandibles designed to tear through any known material. They died like insects against a storm. Zara moved through them with fluid grace, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to process and respond to threats faster than they could form. Her weapons sang their deadly harmonies, each note precisely tuned to disrupt Kethvar biology at the cellular level. Warriors that had survived 1,000 battles simply fell apart as their molecular bonds dissolved, their death screams echoing through corridors that had never known defeat. Finally, she stood before the sealed doors of the spawning chamber, barriers of living metal that had protected the HFY Empress since the beginning of her reign. They were designed to withstand the explosion of stars, to turn aside the fury of collapsing dimensions. Against architect technology, they lasted approximately 3 seconds. The Empress waited inside, her massive form coiled in the center of the chamber like a biological mountain. Her eggs pulsed around her in their thousands, each one containing the potential for another generation of galactic conquest. Her eyes, compound structures that could perceive across multiple spectrums, fixed on the small figure that had destroyed her empire. "So," she said, her voice a harmony of clicks and subsonic vibrations that the instrument translated for Zara's benefit. "The last human comes to face the mother of the HFY. You have fought well, little predator, but you cannot kill them all. My children span the galaxy. Even if you destroy me, others will carry on the great consumption." Zara stepped into the chamber. Her armor's glow casting strange shadows on the organic walls. "You're wrong," she said simply. "I'm not here just to kill you. I'm here to make sure your species learns the same lesson you taught mine. That extinction is the price of choosing to be monsters." The Empress lunged with speed that defied her massive size, her claws extending to rip this impudent creature apart. But Zara was no longer fully human, no longer bound by the limitations that had made her species vulnerable. She flowed aside from the attack like liquid lightning, her weapons carving precise wounds that severed the nerve clusters controlling the Empress's motor functions. The ancient tyrant crashed to the floor, her body paralyzed but her mind still aware. Around her, her eggs began to crack and dissolve as the bio-neural network that sustained them collapsed with their mother's defeat. "This is for Earth," Zara said, raising her weapon for the final strike. "This is for every human child you murdered, every world you burned, every dream you crushed. This is for Captain Morrison and the crew of the Defiance. This is for all the species you consumed and all the civilizations you destroyed." The weapon discharged, its energy reaching into dimensions beyond normal perception. The Empress didn't simply die. She was erased from existence so completely that even her memory began to fade from the hive mind that had sustained HFY civilization for 3,000 years. Across the galaxy, the effect was instantaneous. HFY fleets suddenly found themselves without purpose or direction, their bioships drifting aimlessly as their controlling intelligence vanished. Warrior drones stopped mid-battle, their programming unable to function without the Empress's guiding will. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known collapsed in the span of heartbeats, reduced to nothing more than mindless animals floating in space. In the depths of the spawning chamber, Zara stood among the dissolving eggs and felt a weight she had carried for months finally lift from her shoulders. The war was over. Humanity was avenged. The galaxy was free. But as she walked back to her ship, passing through corridors filled with the corpses of her enemies, Zara realized her journey was far from finished. The HFY were gone, but the galaxy was still full of species that needed protection. Civilizations that could benefit from the wisdom the architects had given her, worlds that deserved a chance to grow and flourish without fear. The last human in the galaxy had become something more than human, and with that transformation came responsibilities that would last for eternity. She was no longer just a survivor or an instrument of vengeance. She was a guardian, a protector, a living symbol of the truth that even the darkest night must eventually give way to dawn. As the instrument lifted away from the dying hive world, Zara began planning for the future. There were other threats out there, other empires that might grow too proud, other predators that might forget the lessons of history. When they did, they would find themselves facing the same fate as the HFY. The galaxy had forgotten humanity once. It would never make that mistake again. This impossible rescue would spread throughout Veltar space within hours. Other species would hear the stories, see the recordings, and begin to hope. The galaxy would remember that there had once been a species called humanity, and that perhaps, just perhaps, they had been wrong to write them off as extinct. But Zara knew this was just the beginning. One destroyed fleet would barely register in the vast HFY war machine. She needed to do more than rescue refugees and destroy isolated forces. She needed to strike at the heart of their empire, to remind them what it felt like to be prey instead of predator. As she returned to her ship, Zara began planning her next move. The HFY had home worlds, breeding centers where their next generation was being prepared for conquest. They had command nodes that coordinated their fleets across hundreds of systems. They had leaders who believed themselves untouchable behind walls of bioships and warrior drones. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The last human in the galaxy was no longer running. She was hunting, and her prey had just become every HFY in existence. The galaxy that humanity still exists, that the spirit which drove your species to reach for the stars burns on. Show them that even the mightiest empire can fall if one person refuses to accept defeat. The corridor stretched before her like a path to godhood. Behind her lay the broken remnants of everything she had ever known. The choice should have been easy, but Zara found herself hesitating. "If I do this," she said aloud, her voice echoing strangely in the organic chamber, "I won't be human anymore, will I?" The presence considered this. "You will be changed, yes, enhanced beyond current human limitations. But your core nature, the qualities that make your species unique, those will remain. You will carry the memory and spirit of humanity forward, even if you are the last to do so." Zara closed her eyes and made her choice. When she opened them again, her gaze was fixed on the corridor ahead. "Then let's remind the galaxy why they should never have counted us out." As she walked toward the Chamber of Wonders, the last human in the galaxy carried with her the hopes and dreams of an entire species. Behind her, in the depths of the Nexus, the architects began to prepare for a war that would reshape the cosmos itself.